let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat.
We haven't
This is so awesome.
We are an open culture that believes
actually
in
a big
importance of
piece
What is that process that a developer, or let's say,
as the Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed.
Hello and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Admin Office Hours. Ask an OpenShift Expert Office Hours. I'll get that right eventually. We've only been doing this program for like 3 months now. So, hello everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. So I am Andrew Sullivan and joined as always myself, Jonny Rickard. Jonny, how does it feel to be back on the bicycle, or maybe back on the proverbial horse?
Yeah, it feels good. It feels good. I got Wi-Fi squared away finally, I think, for now. So next week should be the real test when Vodafone comes there. For those that don't know, which is probably everybody except for the 2 people on the screen and my coworkers, like I moved, but I didn't just move. I moved like across the pond, so I live over in the UK now. So yeah, so I'm like basically like rebuilding the foundation of everything and trying to get all my stuff squared away. So yeah, it's good to be back and finally starting to get on a schedule again, which is quite nice.
Our Hope 9, I see your chat there about my microphone being bad. Hopefully it improves. Okay, yeah, somebody just said better now. Dean is also giving me the thumbs up. So, technology is hard. It's a good thing I don't work for a technology company. Otherwise that could be dangerous. So good to see you again, Jonny. It's been a few weeks.
You too.
I know you've been busy doing all kinds of craziness and all kinds of other things that are going on. So happy to see you starting to get settled and starting to find the rhythm and everything. And of course, now we're back on the air, so to speak. So
yes.
And I say all that not to downplay. We also have I'm going to say a special guest because I've known Dean for a long time. He's been on the stream before, and we're very happy to welcome him back, although in a different role than previously. So Dean, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Hey everyone, so my name's Dean Lewis. I now work for Isovalent, the company behind the Sullivan open source project, but also the enterprise offering and TechCon, if you ever looked at it, which is, I think, a fantastic product. It's my favorite within the portfolio, shall we say. But yeah, last time I was on here, I was working for VMware and I was talking about best practices of running OpenShift on top of VMware platforms. And I think it's safe to say the world has vastly changed since those days. And I know we've kind of always been back and forth, like, oh, I should come on and we can talk about more things. We're at VMware, or here now I'm working at Isovalent, and now we're at Isovalent under Cisco as part of an acquisition. So yeah, it's been a long journey to get back, but fantastic. I'm glad to catch up with you on this live stream.
Yeah, and Isovalent Cilium is something that has been I have used it a handful of times, deploying it into clusters, testing it out, stuff like that. But it's been a little bit. So I'm interested to hear updates to see what's been going on and kind of hear kind of the broader state of things that are happening. In particular, Dean, you and I were chatting beforehand of like being a part of Cisco means that, well, there's a bigger portfolio of things that are, I'll say, at your disposal. So I think this will be a really interesting stream, and it's something that networking is a hobby of mine and something that I sort of understand, but I'm very passionate about. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of canned slides that I put together for a specific OpenShift with Isovalent webinar the other month, and you can get that on demand if you go to isovalent.com. If anyone wants to kind of hear the full kind of spiel from that point of view. Today, I kind of want to do a little bit of curation. I don't want to do death by slideshow because no one loves that. And I do actually have an OpenShift environment set up in the background with a little bit of Sullivan installed as well. So we kind of demo a couple things like the UI and maybe some policy things and stuff like that as well. And, I can see comments already coming as well. And I'm quite happy to take Q&A throughout from people in the comments. And if I can answer the question, I'll answer it the best I can. If I can't answer the question, I'll just say I can't answer it. But yeah, I think
Jonny and I do that all the time. It's okay.
Exactly. Yeah, we're very good at that.
It's the best way to be, right? Everyone can spot when someone's struggling for the answer, but trying to make it up on the spot. But I think you mentioned the Cisco acquisition, so we're just over a year of being acquired by Cisco, and there was a lot of mixed messages when Isovalent announced we're going to be acquired by Cisco. I think is rightly so. We've seen a lot of consolidation in the market across the whole technology sector, and I think you guys probably feel it in Red Hat too under the IBM.
So when it was announced, I wondered in my head, and I didn't know that you worked at Cilium at the time, but I wonder if you all had the same sort of sentiment, the same reaction that a lot of Red Hat folks did when IBM announced the acquisition. So.
Yeah, definitely. What was also really interesting was like there's quite a number of people who are ex Cisco at some point in their engineering lifetime, or so there's that feeling of going back as well, where they maybe moved on for various reasons and going back to Cisco. Overall, I think the initial messaging from Cisco, which was quite good, was very much like on day one. This is, why we want to acquire Isovalent. This is what we want to do with Isovalent. This is our goal for the next 12 months and goal for beyond as well, which I think was very, very good and very clear, because, working with a previous vendor, shall we say, that wasn't quite the case. And that really helped. But one of Cisco's pieces was they were very much committed to Isovalent and the product stack of Isovalent continuing as it currently is on its current trajectory, which was what you are doing in the market for customers is the right thing. When Cisco were talking to their customers, they were only hearing great things about Isovalent, about Cilium, and about how that's enabling that cloud native adoption, whether it's public cloud with Red Hat, in their own data center, wherever that may be. And Cisco didn't want to touch that. And in a year on, I can pretty much say that's still kind of the case. We are still building and delivering on our original fundamentals as a company. My day job is still stayed the same, to work on all things Cilium and Tetragon and our enterprise products and our platform partners as well. It's just that world's got a little bit bigger as well. And I think we'll probably touch on that at some point, discussing a little bit of ACI as well.
Well, it's funny to me because Cisco has been a mainstay in the data center forever, right? It's one of those, like, nobody gets fired for going with Cisco or
Yes.
IBM or like the typical big 3 or 5 vendors that are out there. And to me, it's interesting to see the evolution of Cisco having big hardware in the data center, which is still there, right, and still a thing that Cisco does. When VMware really came to be a mainstay in the data center, right, that got extended out with Nexus and the 1000 Vs or V1000, 1000V, right, and all that other stuff. And now we're seeing similar types of things with Kubernetes, which my biased point of or perspective of the world, right, this is it's a reassurance / reinforcement that Kubernetes and that paradigm of deploying applications is really becoming mainstream.
Yeah, 100%. And that mainstay of Cisco in the data center didn't just stay consolidated to like the networking piece. I always used to think, and I always kept kind of a network background for many years, because I was kind of thinking, well, no matter what happens, even if it's public cloud, like ultimately there is still a network device there somewhere, and it's still running routing protocols, and it's still got security on there, and and I can adapt and still kind of maybe work in those areas if I need to, as well. And to be fair, if you go to like let's say AWS console, but there are other public cloud providers out there that you may prefer, you go in and try and configure a networking rule or the firewall rule for just a virtual machine, and it's still going to be allow from source to destination, what port, allow, deny, silently drop, and those are the exact same things you were doing years ago on a physical firewall inside of your own data center. So maybe the end point has changed, but everything stays the same. And I think as well, what's kind of interesting for me on the Cisco is we also had an announcement at Cisco Live, which was the Isovalent load balancer, software-defined load balancer, built on the foundations of eBPF and Cilium and all those things everyone really loves at a project level and an enterprise level. But it's software-defined, so you take that as the appliance, and you can deploy it to a bare metal machine. You can deploy it as an appliance inside of your hypervisor or into your public cloud. But it's built on the underlying fundamentals of cloud native APIs. So what's happening now is you've got a load balancer which is built for your developers, your CI/CD, and all the rest of it, and not this archaic legacy thing taking up rack space in a data center that's dedicated to it. And you can scale it out and down as you need. And that And
Dean, I just had an explosion of questions, so
it's really fantastic as well from an announcement point of view, because like there's been a lot of internal effort around that by the engineering team, by our marketing team to get things ready, you know, by lots of teams coming together. It was kind of a whole piece because we kind of took that, you know, even a core idea from inside of Kubernetes itself that we were doing with the networking level to make this broader from a adoption point of view, because you can use this in your data center and never have to put this near a Kubernetes stack, right? Like this can be, you know, for your traditional applications still and provide fantastic low resource overhead, high performance scalability from a load balancer point of view, but completely reworked. And I was kind of really happy to see that out there when it got announced at Cisco Live. And then the analysts started to pick it up. And one of the analyst articles was like, Cisco's back in the load balancing game. And I was sat there thinking, oh yeah, Cisco doesn't do load balancers. They do so many networking devices and things that, like, even when I stopped working with Cisco as like a consultant, they've gone so far, but it's like load balancers was just something they kind of stayed away from after exiting that for a while. And now, you know, Cisco bringing on Isovalent, they were looking at what we're doing there. And again, that was kind of another thing that they continue to push and help us achieve and do. And, you know, it was announced at Cisco Live, which obviously is a, you know, a really big thing for us as well. And the customer feedback's been, you know, absolutely fantastic. So go on, you've got some questions about that. Hit me with it.
yeah, well, I think there's two core questions that I wanted to bring up. So one, and I think it's going to dovetail into other things, is eBPF.
Yeah.
Right. eBPF is something that we hear about, particularly in the networking world, but also in the observability world and a few other areas. So I'm curious your take and your interpretation of or description of eBPF. But the other one is a load balancer also piques my interest from the perspective of Gateway API and how Cilium fits in with Gateway API.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll take the first one, which is explanation of eBPF. So I will happily steal the kind of format of explanation from when I moved to Isovalent. So eBPF is a little bit like what JavaScript did for the web browser. We're doing an operating system and kernel level. So that was an extensibility way to build new things in a controlled manner. And that is verified that we're doing it with web pages in the web browser that went from web 1.0 to, you know, pretty much what we see today. eBPF is kind of similar. So if we think about many years ago, whenever you built an application, that application would go through the operating system stack, down into the kernel stack, so it'd be translated, and then back up through those layers, and there'd be various different problems. And if you've ever used Microsoft before, there's this really cool thing called a blue screen of death. So, you know, if you had a driver that was wrote incorrectly or just kind of some sort of panic, it would blue screen of death, and that'd be really bad. eBPF is essentially the ability to kind of skip that OS level and go straight into the kernel level. And that's really, really scary. Because we don't want blue screen of deaths or purple screen of deaths or whatever color, you know, flavor of Linux you use. The core team that built around that already thought of that straight away as well, right? Kind of what comes with great power is great responsibility. So there are checks and balances in there. So there's verifiers and so forth. The code can only be so big in terms of what can be executed as well. And from that point of view, the co-founders of the company and the engineers that were there kind of before it was even Isovalent as a company were looking at the power of eBPF, and they were thinking, okay, we've got this ability to now write small applications or programs that can go to the kernel level, read events, or deploy and program the kernel as well, which is really cool. What can we do next? And essentially, the next thing for that was kind of like, let's build a data path. So Thomas Graf, who's kind of like engineer number one, working on this and some of the others, he was originally at Red Hat many years ago working on vSwitch, OVS. So he kind of looked at that and said, oh, you know, I spent years doing all these things with OVS, but there's kind of lots of limitations there for very many reasons. But with Cilium, if I rewrite and create kind of a new standard of networking, I can do some build the data path at the kernel level and alleviate some of those things. And that's kind of where we then come to like some of these really cool areas like observability. If you own kind of that data path level at kernel, you're seeing all of the events and you've got all the control, you can also then get all of the visibility from that point of view. So we're not only able to kind of see packets going, you know, back and forth, you know, without any interaction at the host level, but also then start to get deep visibility in what's inside those packets and what's happening there. So application visibility type level as well. And I think that those kind of were the key things up front that really stood out at a Cilium open source project level when you look at this plethora of available CNIs, because I think we've all learned Kubernetes from the same point of view, which is install Kubernetes and install Flannel. Why are we installing Flannel? Because it's really simple and there is not anything to configure with it. So it's just deploy, done, connectivity. And then
I started with Flannel. Yep.
Yeah, and because there's kind of no configurability, there's no network policies, there's no kind of advanced load balancing, there's no visibility monitoring. So then, people building all these things on stacks and deploy a big Prometheus and deploy Grafana, and then I need some more agents to see what's going on elsewhere. And that becomes really consuming and all-encompassing. And when Cilium kind of dropped, it took a different viewpoint here, which is a lot of the data you want is from the network. You can get this from the CNI itself. And also, because it's been done at the kernel level, it's really kind of low overhead from that point of view. Kind of what I like going forward is, when I started at Isovalent, we were still kind of having to explain eBPF in the room whenever I go to conferences, whenever I do workshops. And that's fine, because it's still quite new and a little bit scary to people. There's lots of questions and kind of misnomers and misinformation out there about it. And now I think I've been here 2 years, just over 2 years. And in that short space of time now, I don't really have to turn up into a room and explain eBPF in depth. So even if people don't fully understand what eBPF's doing, they kind of know it as a trusted technology going forward, not a new to market.
It's become an implementation detail where it's no longer new and scary. It's accepted as this is how it is. It's trusted. Therefore, I don't need to have all of the details.
Yeah, and it's an implementation detail that you don't need to know the fine art of as well. Like when we install like a network card and you need a driver. No one ever dives into exactly what a driver's doing. We just need to know it works, which is kind of like eBPF. It's behind the scenes. As long as you're running the right level kernel, it's going to have the right features available to it, and you just use Cilium like a normal application on top of it, so taking advantage of those capabilities. For those,
you don't learn C just to go in and
driver
files and be able to verify them. Yeah.
I used to go to conferences or do webinars. The first thing I'd say when I was explaining like eBPF is, don't worry if you don't understand this screenshot of like some C code. I'm not a kernel developer either, and I don't need to be a kernel developer to use and operate Cilium, which is fantastic. It's like there's enough things to learn when you're kind of dealing with Kubernetes. And for those out there in the world who want to dive more into that, or the history of eBPF as well, there is actually a documentary on YouTube about all this. And it's kind of really interesting. They did a like cinema screening inside of one of the KubeCons, I think maybe a year ago. I'm just trying to think which KubeCon it was that they had, because I remember everyone with the popcorn and everything as well. I'll grab the link for it in the background whilst we're talking.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I was at Salt Lake and I was at Chicago, and I don't remember the popcorn, but that doesn't mean anything. So
I will put that in the chat with us, and you can share that out to everyone on YouTube. It's 30 minutes. It's an interesting watch. Like I learned some stuff and how these things come about, and ultimately, most of the people at the engineering level are all tied to enterprise companies, but all have this idea of how to bring and develop eBPF to the Linux kernel. That then set this up for kind of that future piece as well. So yeah, that's really cool. And then the second question was about the load balancer. You're going to have to remind me what it was.
I was just curious, if Isovalent and Gateway API, if there's alignment that's happening there.
Yeah, so definitely. So Cilium already, whether you're using the open source or the enterprise, has adopted Gateway API as a standard inside of Cilium. What that means is Gateway API is something developed as part of the Kubernetes SIGs. It has versions and releases as part of its capabilities. As soon as those are released, then the following version of Cilium will adopt that straight away. There's no rework for Cilium needed, which means it can just use those Gateway API features straight away. Fantastic. Cilium has also got some specific capabilities built on top of Gateway API, taking advantage of that, taking it further as well. That then means when you look at the Isovalent load balancer, because it's got Cilium at its kind of core in terms of its foundations of how it was built, Gateway API is available there, which means we can still take advantage of those pieces. The difference being is if you're using Gateway API today, whether it's inside of Cilium or inside of another Kubernetes networking platform, you are tied to using that inside of that Kubernetes cluster only. And there, whatever cool and crazy things you create, or even if you code things yourself and have it committed into the OSS Gateway API, like it's still within your Kubernetes cluster, right? Whereas with our load balancer, it's outside of your Kubernetes cluster. So you can basically then do all these really fancy cloud native based things in Gateway API to the to whatever your backend is. So that backend could be a virtual machine, a bare metal machine, a Kubernetes cluster, things inside of a Kubernetes cluster, so not just the Kubernetes cluster itself. It could even be to public cloud workloads, whether that workload is, again, a virtual machine, or whether it's even maybe like a serverless endpoint. There's lots of options there. And I can see a couple of questions coming in the chat. So is Cilium certified for OpenShift? That'd be pretty harsh if it wasn't, and I was coming here to talk about that, right? So yes, we are a fully certified third-party vendor with OpenShift. I'll get the links for that as well. You will see.
I just posted a KCS that has the list of certified CNIs.
You've got it. See, you're quick. See, I have this one kind of on standby for a lot. So we're on there. I think a key interesting thing there as well is like we're not just certified for OpenShift. We're certified for various capabilities side of OpenShift. So we're also certified for various versions, so cross versions of Cilium to OpenShift versions. We're certified for networking, which is container-led networking inside of a normal OpenShift deployment. We also cover virtualization, so that's the enabling the KubeVirt components. And recently, we've also added certification support for Service Mesh. So that's where you're deploying Red Hat Service Mesh as part of your cluster as an add-on. Sullivan is still certified to be running as your default CNI there. And there's a couple other cool use cases we've got certified as well in the background. So I think I might be right in saying we are still the only third party that is certified to run in ROSA today, which is the Red Hat managed offering in AWS. We have also been validating hosted control plane. So not only is that part of the workload deployed clusters, but also running Cilium as the default for the main management cluster. I can't remember the right terminology for that inside of HPC. As it stands today, HPC from Red Hat doesn't have a active certification. It's been worked on. There's a Red Hat K issue for it. And that will be available soon. And we've already been testing that framework with Cilium as well, helping to get that. So there's a lot of engineering effort that goes on between the two companies. We meet quite regularly from that point of view. The interesting one is the follow-up question. Can we migrate from OVN to Cilium? So from a Red Hat point of view, you are migrating to a third-party networking stack, meaning the supplied networking stack from OpenShift is no longer in use. So from that point of view, Red Hat say we don't support this. And what they mean by that is you are removing our networking layer. So you need to go and work with your third party or whoever you're moving to. They need to support that migration, not us, which I think is very reasonable. So from an Isovalent point of view, yes, we support a migration to Isovalent Networking for Kubernetes, which is the enterprise grade version of Cilium. There's a lot of nuances there when you do this, depending on the state of your OpenShift environment at the time. So we typically go through that typical support method where you would open a ticket, state your intent. Our team of solution architects would work with you to map this out and go through it. We have a run book for all of that to fully migrate you over it. We run tests on that ourselves. But it's always a little bit confusing when Red Hat says, nope, not supported. And like I say, the bit there is because you are moving to a third-party software stack, so that makes sense, right? From a Red Hat point of view, they're not going to support you to, migrate to another hypervisor, for example, because it's not what they're in control of.
Yep. I'll also point out that you can deploy Cilium at install time.
Yes, and that's the preferred method. You don't have the nuances of a migration, and there is downtime with the migration, right? Because again, you're removing that network stack, which is actively in use by your workload. So there's always going to be migration there. There's always going to be downtime when you do that. So yeah, even for us, where possible, if customers can deploy new and migrate workloads over, is typically more risk averse from that point of view. And a lot of businesses, typically when they kind of do a risk ratio on that type of work with the migration, they're going to fall back to, default install Cilium on a new cluster and slowly migrate applications over that way instead. So yeah.
Going back to the cluster should be disposable, so you should be able to move your workloads around, right? 12-factor apps and cloud native and all those fun things. We all do that, right?
Yeah, and that's always a nirvana, which is, everyone strives to go towards, and GitOps is the way to do that as well, which is codifying, the deployments and managements and kind of reconciling of that as well. So yeah, it's, this is kind of, again, why we say, come over with our customer success team. We will help step you through that. We definitely don't want any customers just kind of go and try it themselves without talking to us at least, because we've got a lot of experience with this as well. As I mentioned, not only are we kind of building and testing this ourselves, but we have regular engineering meetings with Red Hat and kind of a joint shared space for all of these types of things as well.
Well, I feel like I have adequately sidetracked you for the moment. So thank you for answering my questions. It's always interesting to me, in particular, because Isovalent was involved very early on with the eBPF adoption for networking and stuff like that. It's always interesting me to find different takes and different interpretations of it. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Great questions as well. I always prefer it when it's kind of a chat. Like I say, I never like to do death by slideshow, these types of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, go on, Jonny. You've not asked a question. We'll let you ask a question.
Listen, I'm still trying to get my brain back in gear, so like I'm just sitting there taking it all in. I do think it's mine is really more of a comment about like the acquisition from Cisco. It's cool to see, these big companies like learning from each other, right? Like, hey, go in, leave. There's a good thing out there. There's no need to go, put my brand on it. All I'm going to do is like acquire it and take advantage of the technology that they have and the expertise that they have, and on the reverse of that, let them use the resources that we have, like the IBM Red Hat thing. To this point, however many years later, I still haven't really felt the IBM purge or anything like that. So it's kind of cool to see that Cisco and Isovalent are kind of going through the same thing. And with the acquisition, you guys are growing together, and Cisco's kind of like, hey, there's a great thing out there. I'm not going to mess with it. Let them go out and do their thing, and we're both gonna win. And I think when companies, oh my goodness, when companies do things like that, I think that it's better for everybody, because for a lot of the super nerds that are like, hey, I'm an open source person, like I only want to work on open source software or open source products, to see like IBM buy Red Hat, I'm sure that was a red flag for a lot of people. To see Cisco buy Isovalent, I'm sure that was like a huge thing. But to see that, oh, like it's untainted, it's unmolested, it's going to be awesome. I think that helps ease the burden of like sticking with it.
Yeah, that came into question quite a lot, and straight away we kind of looked at what was being said internally, and we were kind of like, we don't change from that. Like, our engineers get a lot of time and ability to kind of like continue to contribute to the open source in the ways that they were doing even before they joined Isovalent, and that's still the same today on Cisco. We still contribute to things like KubeVirt and QMU, for example, which sits under it, and loads of very disparate projects in the open source, because it affects what we're doing even at the enterprise level. We've got people working for us that are various different maintainers of different open source projects as well. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, because I've wrote about this in a blog post at Isovalent, like what we do in the community, and we even have like a dedicated community team for this thing. That team still exists, hasn't changed since moving into Cisco, and still has the same remit going forward. Maybe you've not seen Cisco's impact in open source in the past when you've kind of thought about it, and talking to various people inside of Cisco, it's the same as well. They're having an impact. It's just maybe not seen to the same likes as like Red Hat, very, very open company, everything you do. The same with Isovalent in that sense, because Cisco have come from a very different age of software development in that sense as well. But ultimately, none of that's changed for us. And if anything, we're also kind of showing a new way to Cisco as well in terms of how we do stuff. So there's that kind of cross-learning from that point of view. And I'm sure that's kind of probably the same, even though, Jonny, maybe you're not involved with IBM, but certainly, some as well.
Yeah, I do. And I now that like we're talking, I do have a question about the load balancer. So is the load balancer that you guys built, is it like a full, like up to L7, or is it like, does it stop at L4? So it's like a full line, like you can do whatever you want to do here, TCP type connections, like.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah, very. So I'm currently just putting together like a technical deep dive blog post of kind of how all the internals of it work and looking at the architecture. But essentially, you deploy the load balancer software into your platform/device of choice. So let's just say it's a bare metal machine today. Inside that bare metal machine, we have two roles. Tier 1 node, that does all the layer 3, layer 4 using XDP, which means processing is done before it even hits the CPU, which is really fantastic. Again, taking advantage of some of those technologies that have come out in the last couple of years. It's that, very, very high scalable, low latency at that level for layer 3, layer 4. Then we back off to what's called a tier 2 node. The tier 2 node is where it handles all of that application level layer 7 processing. You can just run the layer 3, layer 4 component if you need. You can run and co-host both layer T1 and T2 on the same node if you need to. It's kind of not recommended for obvious reasons from scalability point of view. But outside of that, again, when you're kind of looking at scaling, if you're doing a lot of maybe SSL type pass-through workloads or kind of manipulation of that as well, you're going to need a lot more kind of going on at the layer 7 level than you are layer 3 and 4. Just scale up the layer 7 side of it, the tier 2s. Vice versa, the opposite side. If you're not doing that kind of crazy, interesting application stuff and redirecting things and A and B and canary testing, those types of things, you can just scale up the front end, the layer 3, layer 4s, and not have to worry about the layer 7 end as well. So we kind of really thought about how to achieve that when we talk about this idea of like you're deploying software, you're putting it on your own hardware or own platform as well. So you need to kind of think about how that side of it works. But I'll have a blog post out soon taking a technical deep dive. I do have a video which kind of shows some of the configuration items and take you through that on YouTube as well. We put that together after the announcement at Cisco Live, and we're very much taking kind of like customers through proofs of concept of that today and kind of moving that through into like production use cases as well.
Yeah, I was going to give you a plug earlier for the YouTube channel. I was taking a look just to do some research before we got on, and I was like, oh damn, there's all kinds of content out here. Like it seems like your CTO, you put a couple videos out there. Like it seems like you guys are pretty active in the YouTube scene.
Yeah, like you guys, when you're in your various technical marketing roles, we're the same, very technical, like to get the information out there, like to kind of show things how things work, very kind of like nuts and bolts type pieces as well. I think Sully's just shared that link for load balancing deep dive, kind of showing you how to configure it and use it and some use cases for that as well. The other side we have as well is we have a labs environment. We've kind of really kind of honed in on our website, having labs that you can spin up really quickly, try out the features yourselves, get to grips with that, understand the different use cases. We have some bit of gamification there with badges that you can earn as well. I know we've been looking at kind of eventually maybe doing something with Red Hat to use the same platform as us. But ultimately, again, we kind of started to do that because, we look at Red Hat, and Red Hat's got lots of labs where you can go to, I think it's learn.redhat.com if I remember correctly. And, not only just read the docs or read a walkthrough or read a blog post, but you can get hands-on and do it live, and you don't have to worry about setting this up yourself and hoping that works really well. We've got one for the load balancer for anyone who's kind of like interest is peaked at the moment about that and maybe seeing it in action as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I shared the link to the labs. Oh my God, to your labs website on your website, to the labs link on your website where they can go to the labs. I promise I can talk. It's just difficult. I'm still obviously jet lagged in my brain. So one last question about the load balancer is that like is that a full enterprise tool, or is it available on the community side at all? Like maybe at a limited capacity, like maybe it's topped out at some.
Yeah, so as it stands today, this is just an enterprise level product because it's fully packaged outside of like a deployment side of Kubernetes environment. You can deploy it inside of a Kubernetes environment as well. That works in a slightly different way, but it is its own thing as a product. So we've taken that fundamentals of everything we've kind of built and learned and people love about Sullivan and eBPF, and then move that more towards like, okay, load balancing is a need in an area and even an industry of its own right. Hence, it's its own product. Some of the capabilities that you see inside of the enterprise load balancer, of course, are available in like Cilium OSS themselves. As mentioned, the difference there is when deploying Cilium OSS in a Kubernetes cluster, it's mandated that it's going to be the traffic inside that Kubernetes cluster that it's using and managing and optimizing.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, and so our Hook 9 asks a question here. Does Cilium provide metrics into Prometheus for either the cluster or the user for the additional features, or is it done handling through its own internals? I'll tangent or I'll add to that. So I know the network observability function inside of OpenShift is eBPF based. I don't know if those are related or if it's a separate thing.
Yeah, so Cilium itself, at a very simple level, exposes a metrics port, a metrics API, and a port that you can scrape. We pull that data into our co-sided product called Hubble, which sits on top of Cilium, where we visualize data. And I'll share my screen in a moment to show you kind of some of the cool things you do with Hubble in my lab environment. Predominantly, we see people configuring Prometheus and Grafana on top to scrape those metrics into Prometheus and then display them using Grafana. In terms, because the question mentioned cluster or user, I know that's specific to the deployment of Prometheus inside of OpenShift. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure if that by default can be scraped by Prometheus. And the reason why I say that is because I remember when I've looked at this previously, OpenShift manages the Prometheus deployment. So any changes you make to that operator, it kind of reverts back straight away, and it's not supported to make the changes to that. So what I would say is for anyone who wants that is kind of pressure Red Hat into a way to kind of configure that so it can be put in there. But of course, however you're doing kind of the user side of stuff, you can kind of scrape and push into that as well. And it really depends what it is that you want from a metrics point of view as well. A lot of customers that kind of use, whether it's Sullivan in the open source, kind of come for things like high performance, scalable networking. Security policies is obviously a big one as well, because we have very advanced capabilities in terms of security policies. But kind of the things that everyone always says is like, oh, we came for these features, but the observability is a bit that we kind of like, wow, that's amazing. Because ultimately, straight away, you are able, without any instrumentation in your workloads or applications, see cross-communication traffic within that cluster. How the traffic was kind of policy verdicts applied to that. You can then start to add policy in for things like layer 7 visibility, DNS visibility for, name requests external to the cluster as well. And that's kind of what people go for. So I think maybe that's a...
Yeah, I was just going to say, Dean, I'm going to use that as the excuse to launch into and hopefully you'll answer this with a demo of like the sort of fundamental question that we've been tapping or dancing around is like, when and why would I choose Cilium over, for example, the default OVIA in Kubernetes, which is OVS based, in OpenShift?
So I think for me, why the Cilium CNI? It's high performance, it's highly scalable, it is using eBPF under the hood, which is kind of a new technology and a way to do things. It's tried and tested from that point of view. There is still some complexity out of the box when you look at, OpenShift by default. And the complexity is not all the features may be necessarily available on day one. If you want maybe some basic service mesh features, you need to bring a service mesh into the OpenShift environment, whether that's Red Hat Open Mesh and its full enterprise features, or whether you go and kind of roll your own, maybe something like Ingress Nginx on top of all of those, because you need to kind of extend the basic root functionality, but maybe not need the full enterprise functionality. Cilium has service mesh capability out of the box today as kind of a lot of that, because again, we can program what's going on at the data path to handle a lot of those things as well. So I think it's kind of a consolidation from that point of view. The limited visibility is kind of always a big one. So whatever kind of platform you look at, you can always get like network stacks from the host level. You can kind of see some rough idea of what's going on with kind of like throughput. That's fantastic. But then, here I've got a command I was just running just to check things actually work the way I expected, because this is my home lab.
Sorry to interrupt you, Dean. We'll need to make that bigger to see. It's a little small.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. How does that look now?
That's better. Yep.
Perfect. So, straight away, this is no instrumentation in my applications. I've made 0 changes to Cilium out of the box configuration, other than ensuring that the Hubble component is enabled. And I can do Hubble observe, and I've got a couple of workloads running inside of my environment, and I can see workloads going from there. So I can see, this pod is making a lot of requests to DNS and coming back. I can see the reply there. If I add the right network policy in, I can then also dive into that packet and see exactly what that DNS request is going forward. If I go a little bit down, so the problem is that I made these pods when I deployed them yesterday really noisy, which makes it a little bit hard to kind of capture everything. So there we go. We can see some communications coming back from the environment, from my external network into my NetShoot B pod, and then going back out as well. And this is without any instrumentations. This isn't adding any additional policies into Cilium. This isn't adding any additional configuration. And I straight away can kind of understand what's going on traffic levels. So at the moment, I'm looking at workloads. I can then start to kind of, maybe do some additional commands in this, so I can just do support, and then I can start to kind of manipulate all of this, because we're looking at that Kubernetes-based metadata in a human-readable way for you to kind of like chop and change through all of that. The other kind of thing that I think is really good from that point of view is I can also do this. So at the moment, that information is kind of really great, but it's like, it's not detailed enough all the way. So if I'm troubleshooting, I can kind of see that information, there's traffic going back and forth between this pod, but I still need to know a bit more about what's going on. So I can output all of this to JSON, and I'll format that really nicely. And then what you see is a really rich flow information being exposed. And this is typically where people may be using like programmatic systems to then pull that data and parse it, manipulate it further if they need to. But straight away now I can see the IP source and destination inside of my cluster, because this is within the cluster communication. I can see the ports of where we're going to, obviously because I'm using an OpenShift environment. DNS works on 5353 rather than 53 for UDP traffic. I can see the identities at Cilium level. I can see the cluster that's running on, because we do cluster mesh features where you create connectivity between multiple clusters where workloads can access them across kind of a meshed networking as well. I see all of that Kubernetes level detail. I can see details about my actual pod, what type of workload it is. And then if I go down, I can see the traffic directions. Is it a reply? Is it being traced by the system? So we can see the response coming in as well. And that's really interesting, because one of the metrics we have available is we can, in our we provide Grafana graphs out of the box that people can use, but you can again, synthesize these metrics and use them in another platform of your choice. But you can actually watch for traffic that is sent out but never has a reply, for example. So maybe an application is now connecting to a dead end point, and you can troubleshoot from that point of view. Or maybe something on the outside of the network is stopping that traffic returning as well. So you do some interesting things from there. If I scroll down a little bit,
I ask similarly, like, can I set up rules to take action? So essentially, like, if I see it, if it's trying to connect to port, I'm going to make up a port 3306, right? MySQL or MariaDB, on an unknown or unexpected destination, can I have it automatically create network policy or something like that?
Yes. So not automatically create a network policy. And the reason for that's very simple. Letting the system do things automatically typically leads to some sort of failure and outage. It's interesting that when we have customers, or people in the community ask that quite a lot, when we dive into those asks a little bit more and kind of say, well, are you okay with the cluster automatically doing this and automatically doing this? And what happens if this happens? And people realize maybe that's not quite the way to do things. But what I'll do in a second is I'll flip over to the UI view, and you can see our policy editor. And you can see how we can kind of create things on demand from the flow as well and apply that to our environment. So just before I do that, the last command I'll show in here is I'm going to show just the verdict dropped. And what we can see here is I'm saying, give me all the traffic across my cluster, which is being dropped. Now, by default, there's a lot of IPv6 stuff that's being dropped, because I allowed dual stack network inside of my environment, but not fully. So this is just because of the way I've set up my demo environment today. You can see there, basically unsupported layer 3 protocol, ICMP v6. So it's being dropped because there's kind of nothing there that's allowing that traffic by default inside of my environment. But again, a really one simple command, which is just saying, look at the verdict where policies are being dropped inside of my environment. Inside of those Hubble flows as well, if it's actually affected by a policy applied by the user, you will also see that being added into that JSON. So we would have something like egress allowed or denied by, or ingress allowed or denied by, depending on the flow of traffic, which way it's going, as to why that's being dropped, so you can correlate a network policy for it. So I'm going to re-share, and let's see if I can find. There we go. So so when I deployed the I automated the deployment of my OpenShift cluster yesterday for this, and I forgot that it actually deploys our Hubble UI Enterprise piece. And that essentially is our old UI in the last version. We've done quite a big rehash of that, and kind of like simplification of like components and so forth. So just so you see, this was part of the traffic that we were looking at before. You're just going to see the old UI, but the concepts are the exact same in the new UI. And I do have a tab to show you some of the new UI as well, because it's a lot more fluid and a bit more reactive as well. But essentially in the UI, this is kind of one of the things people love us for, is we can do really, I think it's kind of simple now for us. We can do things like this, where we can visualize all that traffic into a network map. We can see incoming flows, outgoing flows. We can see here I've started to parse some of that traffic. So we've got some HTTPS traffic there. We've got some ping traffic going on between my NetShoot pods. We can see the different pods talking to one another. We can see that communication to the DNS of OpenShift inside of the cluster. And here I've got this scrolling view. And very quickly there, you can also see some layer 7 information, because we're parsing that traffic, because I put a policy in place for it as well. That raw flow that I showed you before in the CLI can also be accessed in the UI itself. So you've got all of that JSON information as well. But going back to your question about policies, so Sullivan network policies can be very, very advanced. They essentially layer on top of what you would get out of the box with Kubernetes network policies, which are kind of like, you can select a label, you can they have a concept of kind of like selecting the right endpoint, but not as in depth as what we do with Sullivan, where you can select an actual identity of a workload. You can also then obviously do layer 3, layer 4, you can do ports, then you can go up into the layer 7 bit, like HTTP-based traffic, DNS traffic, and so forth. So here is and this is for Jonny, because he's going to get used to this, in my Blue Peter moment, which is a UK-based program that all the children watch, is one that I've created earlier, ready for questions like this. So in the UI, we saw the same traffic that I saw in the CLI. I can click this and I can say add rule to policy, very simply. It will then start to generate this for me. It looks at like a flow map. It's a little bit similar to the service view that we saw earlier. And then I can start to do things like, default ingress deny, or allow all ingress. And I can then start to say, what else is it being able to connect to? So the endpoint selector here is all traffic inside of my namespace. This will be applied to my namespace. We're then going to egress traffic to a particular endpoint. So we're going to say all traffic going to NetShoot pod B in port 80. Now, I know if I take this policy and apply it to my cluster, it will actually break quite a lot of the traffic, because by default, once you've added a policy that's restricted as such, the namespace traffic will go into default deny. So if the traffic does not match an existing policy, it's going to be denied by default. Very similar to what we used to do with physical firewalls in our data center as well. But what's really good here is straight away is I can start to build up this policy and add more in. So one of the things we don't want to break by default is DNS requests. Even if I allow that traffic from anything to my NetShoot B workload, if it can't look up that DNS name of how to get to it, it's never going to get there anyway. So I can just allow that rule. Here we've already selected from the flow, but I can add in maybe more pod selectors, additional ports. I can maybe allow it to go to any namespace inside the cluster rather than just within the same namespace. I can also even add in things like mutual authentication. So this is authentication of the two security identities from inside of Sullivan talking to one another. So they will do mutual auth before they communicate with one another, which is essentially a service mesh capability without having to implement a full service mesh product out of the box. This is where I was talking about before about reducing kind of that platform and tool sprawl is why people come to Sullivan, because a lot of things there out of the box without having to bring lots of different projects together as well. The last thing I'll do is I'll just quickly flip over to the Timescape UI. And the reason for that's very simple. So we've updated the UI. We've kind of like homologated it into the components of how it's deployed. So that sits under our Timescape product. So it's still Hubble at the end of the day, still what we've been seeing before. Just looks, feels, and runs a lot better. So here we've got kind of a more reactive interface. If I hover over here, it's going to start to draw out lines for me. I've got drop-down boxes in the middle of these boxes as well in terms of where I'm looking. If it's a multi-cluster setup, we can look between multiple clusters as well. And using Timescape, we can also store a lot of that data historically as well. We've got a couple of different options for that in terms of deployment architectures. The reason why that's really important is that is a limitation in the open source edition of Cilium today, is that the information is live, and as soon as it drops out of the buffer inside of Cilium, it's gone forever. In the enterprise edition, we have that historical retention and analysis for you as well. We can see here, kind of, I just click into the traffic, it's going to redraw. I can see all that Kubernetes data. Again, it's going to build filters for me automatically, and I can change those as I want to. And again, even in the new UI, it looks the same, it feels the same, because we show all that data as well. And then from a policy point of view, we've kind of just started to rework how that looks. So here, we've got the ability to show, again, that same policies. We see the policies that have been applied inside of the cluster. It just looks and feels a lot better than it did in the old UI, because in the old UI, it was just here on the left-hand side, and a little bit less intuitive. And we also have the ability then you can compare as well when it's created, when it's updated, and then to the which version do you want to compare that to. And we'll show you a differential of what's been added and removed. So one of the things that's really key for platform operators when we speak to them is someone's, programmatically as part of their workload deployed a new HTTP policy, and they've put their own port in, they've stopped traffic themselves. How do we know that's what it was? It was a human error. And you can just go and diff that as well.
Hey, Dean, it seems like we're at a good stop, or well, at least a good breaking point. We have a question from, I'm sorry for butchering your name, Fatur. Fatur, I apologize. What are the pros and cons when using Cilium instead of OVN?
Yeah, so the pros from Cilium is a lot of what I've already covered, kind of like the high performance, the scalability. It's running at an eBPF level, which again is kind of, it's a different way to run and manage that data path. There's a lot of advantages to that. It is, of course, different to OVN from that point of view. I'm not going to go into a bake-off and say absolutely everything's fantastic compared to OVN. But of course, I feel like it is. We've got that observability I just showed you. That's out of the box. That was with no instrumentation inside of my applications, and I can dive in and see, like layer 7 information. So if I go back to my connection screen, you can see there, we can see there's a get. There's no milliseconds of latency for that.
You probably need to zoom that in.
Oh, yeah, no problem. See, I'm on a big screen, like all people, I'm on a big screen nowadays, so it looks correct to me. And it's dropped up. There it is. There you go. You can see that as well. And then we can go down and we should be able to see, there we go, see HTTP details as well. And we can even see like the request headers and things like that for all that traffic. So, that's out of the box. Then we've got the advanced level of network policies, how you would control access to and from workloads inside of the cluster, to and from outside of the cluster. You can marry that to like the ingress features that are there as well, and take advantage of things like Gateway API, which would be additional add-on components inside of OpenShift. In terms of cons, as we've mentioned before, if you're already using OVN today, you've got to think about your migration strategy to Cilium. Is it build a new cluster and migrate your workloads, or is it do a migration as well? And there's different kind of like risk profiles to that and so forth. But ultimately, like there's kind of that inherent decision of like features and support and kind of scalability that maybe you're looking for one or the other to kind of get there. I think over a year ago, for example, OVN didn't really have anything in the way of like great BGP support, which I think was quite fair to say. Cilium has had full BGP support for quite a while inside of the product, and it's very advanced. So a lot of customers were looking at like maybe the BGP feature, which was missing from OVN, to migrate over. Now there's a case where OVN has implemented more robust BGP features, and that's maybe a reason to stay with OVN. Again, you may then start to look at kind of everything themselves. Ultimately, everyone's kind of use cases are unique to them in terms of why they might go to one to the other. Another area we kind of see this as well is you might not always be running OpenShift in every cluster, in every platform. So then how do you what do you standardize across those? If you're going to maybe use a bit of EKS, a bit of OpenShift, a bit of Rosa, for example, you can do that at the CNI level, and a lot of the functionality you use inside your clusters comes at that CNI level to begin with.
So do you think it's fair, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like, do you think it's fair that OVN is probably, it's a good general purpose networking capability, and then where Cilium is probably like your more advanced tier, like that next tier up for the feature sets that you're looking for?
Ultimately, you know, if it wasn't a good general purpose CNI out the box for OpenShift, I'm sure Red Hat would either build something different or ship something different.
Right.
We go back to that conversation. Like, remember the old days where the only option was flannel? What was the question? So, you know, and it works for a lot of people. Again, you know, one of the things out of the box that people look for is like things like cluster mesh. I need to connect two clusters together. Workloads need to talk across that, and I need to be able to add network policies to that to control that communication as well, without kind of thinking about, can I re-architect my data center or my data center networking to make that happen? I know, again, you know, I think that's a recent addition as an add-on to Red Hat OpenShift, to be able to kind of have those types of features as well. And again, the implementation for that, again, because I've looked at this probably about 6 months ago. I know the implementation of how you guys essentially do a similar cluster mesh is done in a very different way, which again may have certain considerations or constraints for a customer when they look at that. It does work for them or doesn't work for them, and you've got to look at a different option.
Yeah, within the Red Hat portfolio, there's a few different ways of doing that, ranging from Submariner with ACM to
the project. That was the product in my head I was thinking of. Like, I couldn't remember the name of it. Submariner was the one I was looking at.
Is it Connectivity Link, Jonny?
Connectivity Link. Yep. Quadrant.
Yep. Yeah, that's another way of doing it. I know Ambient Mesh or Service Mesh 3.0, I think, adds some additional capabilities there as well.
It's all the latest and greatest, and I think Ambient just got supported or went tech preview or something like that over the summer. So yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Sully.
No, this is all good. I love like the kind of back and forth size. So I think one of the things I wanted to touch on a little bit at a last piece, because I know we're coming to the top of the hour as well. But before we came online, we were chatting about the Cisco side and best together story and what happens linking Cisco world and things to Isovalent. And ACI is something that comes up a hell of a lot because there's a lot of customers out there with ACI deployments out of their environment. We have, and I've now got to find this live on our website. So we've done. So this is really interesting. So we've got a brief which talks about a match made in heaven. So this is kind of like a sneak preview. A lot of things that are already there today where you don't necessarily need an active integration to be able to like do something. And that kind of is like a nice infographic that was made by my colleague Nico. And I'm just going to do a quick Google search for the other one because there is a brief. That's the blog post. That blog post. Yeah, so we've got a nice long blog post there that talks about this because we've been doing this with a lot of customers. But there's a lot of synergies already where you deploy a Kubernetes cluster into ACI. One of the recurring themes that we hear from customers, or rather network operators that are responsible from ACI, and I'm just going to copy this last link as well because this is a lovely guide by technical leaders at Cisco working with us to kind of like validate design patterns and deployment patterns for this. One of the things we were hearing quite a lot, you know, going to KubeCon, going to Cisco Lives, network operators to kind of come up and say, hey, we've got this Kubernetes thing and it runs on top of ACI, or it runs on top of our data center, but we get very little information or visibility into there, or zero. And we know there's lots of networky things going on inside of it, security policies, ingress, egress type setups, but essentially it's dumped onto our network. We have zero visibility and zero control and traffic engineering of it. And then ACI has to deal with it, or my network has to deal with it. What I've just shown you from a Cilium point of view is, you know, the Hubble graph, the flow visibility, the control of all of that, how to create network policies. And the network operators are looking for that kind of visibility as well. And what's kind of really great with the ACI out of the box is you can still operate ACI as it is. We can run your Kubernetes platform with OpenShift and Isovalent Enterprise there as well. We can do things like the BGP routing, peering, the network traffic manipulation as well. You can set up your I think call them ACI policies. I'm trying to remember the exact names because they have very specific names for these in ACI world. That allows all that traffic back and forth as well. And so we've got a co-authored document there. When you download it, it is in draft form as it stands today because we published this early for the last Cisco Live, and I'm just working on getting that firmed up to be a full GA release. And anyone who downloads the draft release today, we'll ping you with an email to say, hey, the full version, fully ratified version is now available as well. But we've already had a number of customers over this past 12 months or so working with us to kind of like optimize OpenShift, ACI, and Isovalent Enterprise working all together as well.
Are you guys going to be at KubeCon? Oh, sorry, Sully.
Yeah, of course. We absolutely love KubeCon. So I myself won't be at Atlanta, but a couple of my colleagues will be. We'll have a team there. We've got a booth there already. I believe we have a little lab space as well at the booth. You can come up, walk up, use a laptop, do some labs, get a sticker, get a badge to credly.com as well, which is fantastic, and maybe some other swag to take away. We'll have, I'm sure, a number of sessions. I can't remember the acceptances for KubeCon come out yet. And we'll also be running a couple of like customer evening events. So keep an eye on our socials for those as well. And then the last plug that I wanted to do for today, which is going to be for my colleague Nico. And I'm just going to get the slide for it because everyone loves a good QR code. Let's see. Share window. There we go. So we are working on a state of Kubernetes networking reports. This is where we're going out to all of our customers, all of our community that's involved with Cilium and beyond, to tell us about networking, Kubernetes, cloud native, that type of thing inside your environment. We're going to collect all that information you've seen, known and loved from vendors, and help kind of give back to us by educating and look out for patterns and so forth as well. So I think we've got a couple of weeks left on that before we close that. So we'd love for the Red Hat community that's joined today to get involved and give us information and answers there as well. That would be brilliant. The more information we get, the better and more interesting we can make that as well. I know certainly even before I worked for vendors, things like the state of network report, state of virtualization, it was always really interesting because it validated a lot of problems I was having on site, but also kind of some areas where I was maybe too blind to kind of see what else was going on in the industry that we kind of need to think about before it's hitting where I was working at that point in time as well.
So we did get another question as well. So OVN added the user-defined network feature recently.
Yes.
Does Cilium have a similar feature for multi-tenancy subnetting / networking?
Yeah, so we have a multi-network feature. So we have, there's two levels to it. So the first one is multi-IPAM. So this is, having different distinct pod level subnets inside of your Kubernetes cluster and allowing routing between them inside of the cluster. We also have a multi-network feature, which is attaching multiple network interfaces into containers. So that maybe you've got like this separation of duty or separation of traffic flows. We see some of that come up in the telco space. And that kind of maps, it's not the same feature as user-defined. We had it slightly earlier, not that we're, playing trump cards on this. So it's not a like-for-like mapping from that point of view. Again, depending on the reason why you're asking for that. So a lot of people are looking at things like virtualization migration. So looking at migrating from a legacy hypervisor to something cloud native based, or maybe OpenShift virtualization. This idea and concept using multiple NICs and reusing IP address space is very necessary from that point of view. If that's the case, taking Sully, we do have another product which was announced at Cisco Live called Isovalent Network Bridge. And that's where we're deploying a appliance into your environment, and that handles a lot of that multi-networking use case when you've migrated a VM but can't change its IP address. Why is it an appliance and not inside of Cilium? Very, very simple. You still need to think about multiple subnet space. It's already being used here in my legacy virtualization platform. It can't be used over here in somewhere else in my data center because everything's routing to here. So we need an appliance which would essentially sit here and then relay that traffic across, creating as the name would suggest, a bridge between that as well. And we're doing some really interesting, unique things there. We've been working with a number of customers in developing that. You will hear more from us, publicly and on our website and that very soon, because I'm going to be getting articles about that up. If the use case is virtual machine migration, and you're looking at Red Hat OpenShift virtualization, and you maybe even using Cisco already today, also get in touch with us and talk to us about that network migration space where you can't just move the network and the IP addresses from one place to the other, and you've got to think about how you handle that as well, because that's kind of where we're looking at alleviating that pain of effort for you.
Yeah. It turns out data center networking is a lot more complex than it used to be, and so accounting for the BGP routes, as we have carved up our networks, right, and the existing technologies did a phenomenal job of this. Of like, hey, I'm tired of having to go to my network team and constantly beg them for a new VLAN and a new subnet, so they just gave me a / something and an AS number, and now we have to figure out. Untangling that is not the right word, but rather how do we make it exist across these two separate platforms that ultimately have to route the traffic to the right place.
Yeah, and the other side of it as well is like, let's say you do a layer 2 stretch between your data centers. It's very, very costly. It's very expensive from man hours point of view, and there is a lot of considerations and nuances with doing that. That's fantastic. Okay, so now you've migrated the VM, but the VM is hard-coded with that IP address. So you're always stuck at that point because that VM's, and you think, okay, we can go in and change it. What if it's an old application where it's hard-coded into the application? It's not even just in the VM, it's an application level. What if that team doesn't exist anymore? And, you kind of always think, well, someone should be able to come around and kind of like rework that, and maybe we'll throw it at ChatGPT and let that figure it out of, how to do that. But, I've worked in environments before where that has been 100% the case, where they've got applications, there's people who can maintain it day to day, the application itself, but the configuration and deployment of it, those teams have gone for some reason. This application might be 10 years old and they've not managed to replace it yet. There might not be hard-coded IP in the application itself. It might be hard-coded somewhere else on your network. So, I've been before where, call center environments, they spin up a homemade application. In that homemade application, which is deployed using a Windows executable somehow over group policies, it's hard-coded the IP address in there on the network because they didn't want to rely on DNS. And now we can never change the IP address of the server because we can't update all of the thousands of clients in the call center. So there's so many considerations that aren't specific or just for that VM on its own, where you think, oh, I can split my subnet up, I can do a layer 2 stretches. You've got to think about other things and that's again where we come in with these challenges with the network bridge, and we're giving you a unique solution to alleviate a lot of that, whereby essentially you migrate the VM. We've got an appliance which is going to help with kind of like a network helper function to transit that data into the new platform from the old place where it used to exist as well. And then on top of that, if you think about some of the capabilities I showed you today from an observability point of view, a security point of view, those will be layered on the top as well. So all of a sudden, you may actually end up migrating the VM, but end up with a whole host of networking options on top of it and security options that you didn't have before in your older legacy platform. And there's a number of platforms we're working with around that, Red Hat being one of them, because obviously very predominant with the Red Hat OpenShift virtualization platform based on KubeVirt as a logical location next step where people want to move their workloads to.
So I know we're coming up on a quarter after, and I know it's getting late for both you and Jonny, so I want to be cognizant and respectful of your time.
I think me and Jonny are just sat here melting. Although maybe not Jonny, because he's from Texas and they have the opposite ends of like the weather, through the year. But definitely today in the UK, it's an unseasonably very hot day.
I've got my fan on. I don't know if you can hear it in the background. Like it is constant because like I'm an AC kind of guy, so like I'm dying a little bit.
Well, for anybody who is watching or listening to us, please don't hesitate to ask any questions in the chat while we wrap up here. For anybody who is not watching us live, you are more than welcome to, so anybody who's watching the recording or listening to the recording, I know a lot of people listen to us like a podcast, don't hesitate to reach out to us. So you can reach out via email is the most, probably the easiest way to reach out. You can reach me at sully@redhat.com or jonny@redhat.com. That's SULLY or JONNY at redhat.com. So we're both happy to get emails. We both do our best to keep up with those and respond to those. Sometimes our inboxes get overwhelmed by not just things that are happening here, but things that are happening in our day jobs as well. So apologies for any delayed responses or anything like that, but we do try our best to keep up with that. And don't hesitate to reach out again, right? If it's been a couple of days or anything like that and you haven't heard from us, like neither one of us will be offended if you send us a hey, you still there?
They've got like Sully in one time zone and Jonny in a different time zone, so they could round robin you guys to
follow the sun, baby.
Yeah, now we just need somebody over in the APAC region, and then it is the sun will never set on the stream, right?
It's true. Yes.
So with that in mind, Dean, any other thing that you wanted to put out?
Yeah, so I think, we kind of covered quite a lot high level for Cilium and its features and so forth. And we had the questions around certification. Hopefully I've made that, really simple and clear in terms of how that third party certification from Red Hat comes from as well. And hopefully I'll be back in the future because, this is just kind of one area of products we're working on. I know we kind of talked a little bit about the load balancer and a little bit about the network bridge capabilities as well, but we've got the whole other side, which is our runtime security side, which applies to kind of, not just Red Hat, but any environment where we do kernel level security, observability, and enforcement at that level before it even gets to the OS or the application level as well, which is kind of really cool and unique as well. So yeah, there's kind of a lot to kind of unpick there from that base that we started talking about, which was eBPF.
Yeah, and Vusa has a question here. What is the correct way to pronounce isovalent? You'll notice I pronounce it isovalent, like isovalent bond in chemistry.
That's exactly where the name comes from, was isovalent bond and connectivity, because in Cilium, we're connecting things together. So that's exactly where it comes from.
All right. Well, Jonny, do you happen to know off the top of your head or have open any future calendar things that we've got going on? I see you frantically looking around your screen.
I was trying to get back. I don't know. We have some stuff in September. So we have the UX team coming back in September to talk about like the new UI changes in 4.19. They were going to be the first week, but I think they're actually they moved until like I think the 19th or something like that. And then we had one group that was supposed to come on next week, but I think they canceled. So
well,
it's all up there.
I've got a side task or side quest of trying to get some more information and hopefully maybe an engineering person or two to come on to talk about the recent tech preview of the descheduler using PSI, so the pressure stall information coming from the kernel, as well as load aware balancing. So effectively where now we can turn it on and it looks at the cluster, it looks at real resource utilization across the cluster and will actively like move workload to the lesser utilization or lesser utilized rather nodes inside of there. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that's happening behind the scenes and underneath the covers there that I really want to pull apart. So hopefully we can find the right people.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I was just going to reply back to R Hope 9. Yeah, R Hope 9, you're right. The calendar is a mess. Like between me moving and life and Sully's work and everything like that, like it's just been chaotic for us. And then with Hillary, she's had some stuff going on as well. So like that live stream has also been kind of like lacking as well. So once she comes back, things will start to get on the swing. And plus,
you're in Europe now, Jonny. We basically shut down over the summertime in Europe. That's what that's what you can blame it on.
It's been a chaotic summer for sure.
It really has been. It really has been. And the answer, I hope not. No, not tomorrow. She'll be back in probably a couple weeks, I think. But we are working with the GitOps team because they just dropped 117. So we're trying to get them on. So I need to reach out to Harriet and find out that when either her or Gerald will have some availability to come on the GitOps guide to the Galaxy live stream. But Dean, to your point, I was working with a customer that's in Germany, and the guy's like, "Hey man, I'm going on vacation." And I was like, "Oh, okay, so you're gonna be back in like a week?" He's like, "I'll be back in August." So it was in June.
Yeah, it has been a chaotic summer for sure. I'm looking forward to getting things settling down, as much as they possibly can. But yeah. And it doesn't help that I've been a manager for coming up on 4 years now, so like I get less and less hands-on keyboard time as it goes on.
But you
Yeah.
get to approve everybody's PTO though, so.
I don't. Yes.
Yeah, your fault, isn't it?
Yay.
You're the manager.
All right. Thank you very much to our audience for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. As always, please don't hesitate to reach out. Again, Sully, SULLY at redhat.com, or Jonny, JONNY at redhat.com. We are happy to get your questions. If we don't know the answer, we try and do our best to connect you with the folks that do know the answer inside of Red Hat, as well as it has led to a non-insignificant number of the topics and the streams that we've covered here. So we do appreciate those messages that we get. With that being said, we will hopefully see you next week here at the same time, although different time zones for Jonny and I. Actually, that's not true. We've always been in different time zones. You were always in central time zone. So anyways, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you so much for coming on, Dean. Really greatly appreciate your time. And of course, you are always welcome back anytime you would like. And with that, Jonny, any last words?
OpenShift Commons is coming up for KubeCon EU, so submissions I think go through August 18th. I'll update the show notes with a link. Carolyn, I'm sorry I could have done a better job of putting that out there, but we're going back to the thing. We have a special guest here, R Hope 9, who won the superhero award last time. So if you know any other superheroes, contributors to the live stream, contributors to Slack or whatever that are doing awesome things, make sure you nominate them so that way they can get recognized at OpenShift Commons at KubeCon, because it's a way that we can support each other and lift each other up and make everybody famous. So
definitely. All right. Thanks, y'all. We'll see you soon.
Ciao.
See you, dude.